live stream the meeting. Set up the meeting for YouTube Live. Okay, let's get to work.
All right.
And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. Taylor Phillips and Ed Smith. My opening statement: the Lions free up more cap money while the Lions and Pistons continue overhauling their rebuild. Ed, what's your opening statement?
My opening statement is that the Michigan Wolverines took care of business in the first round, as well as opening weekend in general. Now it's on to the next and one step closer to being that last team standing in April.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports mobile app, VigIt. Enter the referral code STABLES for Stables Media when you sign up. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the VigIt app and sign up with the referral code STABLES, capital S, lowercase letter B in the middle, for 1,000 free Vig coins. So let's start with those Michigan Wolverines, shall we? 82-66 win over the Texas Southern team. And then the LSU Tigers, Michigan, a seesaw battle. Very close one the whole time, but Michigan pulled away at the end, 86-76. So, Ed, what did you like what did you see and what did you like?
Well, moving on, there's not much to talk about in regards to Texas Southern because, again, unless somehow they pulled a Virginia against UMCB, obviously we would have been all over that, but it was no point and no bearing. They took care of business. They did what they need to do. Now on to LSU. I saw some people on Twitter, whether it be LSU faithful, whether it be, people like Seth Davis or whatnot, saying, hey, pay close attention. This could be a possible upset alert type of game. And for the first, 5-10 minutes of that game, it certainly felt like it because LSU came out swinging. They gave Michigan an early punch in the stomach and to the face early on when you think about it, in terms of the early blitz of their style of play, trying to speed up the game as fast as possible. Played this thing out from a half court aspect as opposed to full court, and their players such as Watford or Javonte Smart, and most importantly, Cam Thomas, who for most part of that game, especially in the first half, looked like the second coming of Kobe Bryant, with not just the fact that he was scoring all these points, but the fact that he was sometimes taking these type of shots that you would think under normal circumstances would not be seen as high quality. At fact, would probably be seen as the exact opposite. But he made them, he hit them, and that got LSU going to a great league. Michigan eventually, thankfully, and this is props to Juwan Howard as well as Phil Montevelli and Coach Washington and pretty much the whole staff as well, of getting the players to focus, to calm down, settle down, focus on your defense, slow down the pace, don't play at their pace, and you'll see the dividends they'll pay out, because as much as prolific as LSU was offensively, their defense left much to be desired. And as long as you do not play at their game, try to play into their pace and their mindset, you're going to have a good time getting some points and getting some baskets on them. Granted, it didn't work out the way you wanted to normally have, between Isaiah Livers still being out and Franz Wagner having a very quiet first half. But once Hunter Dickinson got involved, as most outlets and most analysts were expecting him to do, knowing they had a size advantage, at least in that regard, once you got Hunter Dickinson involved, and of course the absolute stellar play from Eli Brooks and Sean D. Brown, both players basically in lieu of Livers' absence, stepped up and each had 21 points. And in regards especially to Sean D. Brown, his defensive effort plus his offense helped lead an incredible margin for the Michigan team in general, as their bench outscored LSU's 26-2. That was the game right there.
Whoa!
Exactly. They had Michigan basically said, Juwan Howard recognized the game plan early on. It was like, okay, guys like Thomas, Wofford, and Smart, let them get what they get, because eventually they're going to tire out and their bench and their depth will not be able to match ours. And that's exactly what happened. You saw other players contributing. Wagner would wake up. Mike Smith overcoming some issues early on where you saw his size being used as a disadvantage against him. I could go on and on. Terrence Washington, Brandon Johns, for example, making key plays when frankly LSU didn't expect it. And then once you saw all these other shots coming at you from different angles, then you eventually saw them start feeding the big fella, getting Hunter Dickinson involved. Even when he got into foul trouble, they still went to their bread and butter in that regard. And once Wagner finally woke up, it was all bets are off at that point. So between Michigan, even by the way, we got to point out the fact also LSU had only 3 turnovers the entire game. They had none, zero in the entire first half. Michigan had 12. And not only did they still manage to withstand all that and win, they won covering the spread as well because they were a 5-point favorite. I told you in private, Taylor, last week, like, hey, I saw the betting line. I'll take that points. I'll take that chance. I'll take those points. But obviously, it looked uneasy throughout most of that first half. But I think the tide started to turn once we saw that Michigan played their game at their pace and not at LSU's. LSU was not able to make the proper adjustments. And again, this is why it all comes down and goes back to coaching, being able to make the adjustments when you need to, putting this, if need be, go ad lib and put in an X factor, make an X factor type of move that the other team won't see coming. And I think Juwan Howard did that by bringing in guys like Williams and Johns to help step up and help out with Eli Brooks and Shawnee Brown, who, like I said before, with Isaiah Livers out, the mindset has to be next man up, and that showed in spades against LSU. So, outstanding win, terrific performance, great adversity moment as well, because this was, I'm sure, a lot of people had their keyboards and their takes already lined up and ready to send out if Michigan were to somehow lose this game. But that disaster was averted. Great job to the boys, and it's on the next weekend in Florida State.
Yeah, and they'll need that next man up mentality against those Seminoles when they tip off Sunday at 5 on CBS in the Sweet 16. So why don't we go ahead and analyze that, shall we?
Yeah, in terms of Michigan versus Florida State in that regard, uh, Michigan is the odds-on favorite, but it is worth noting that the point spread is a little bit smaller here at around 3 or 2.5 than it was against LSU. I don't know if that speaks to how Florida State's style in the ACC compared to Michigan's in the Big Ten. Florida State doesn't have to rely on being so physical. They will let their athleticism pick you apart. But between that and knowing that Michigan does have the better defense, you would think has the better coaches to know when to make the right adjustments at any given point. Um, and knowing that they've faced tougher competition. Granted, I know the Big Ten did not have, shall we say, a stellar performance in this tournament. In fact, through the first weekend, the only Big Ten team that remains is the Wolverines. But I still think as long as Michigan took care of the ball, and when you see Eli Brooks, forget about the fact that Shawnee Brown may contribute or Franz Wagner may have a contributing role. If Eli Brooks remains at this consistent level, there's a reason, as was noted in the broadcast, Phil Maltabelli, the assistant coach for the Wolverines, he pointed out and specified Eli Brooks as the MVP of this team for a reason. No, he's not the flashiest. No, he's not the most productive. He may not even be the best player, especially when you speak to guys like Dickinson and Livers and even to an extent Wagner, but he is the most important as to how the team operates, how he facilitates and makes everyone around him look and perform better. Mike Smith, I think, deserves some credit as well, considering the fact that he was the star at Columbia last year. And now here he is in a much different role altogether here in Michigan after grad transferring. But it's clear, as we see and as we saw how Michigan needed crucial bucket after crucial bucket, Eli Brooks was that man who stepped up. So I don't think Coach Montevelli was far off by saying that Eli was the MVP. He said that for a good reason. He's seen him every day in practice, seen him in every game, film session, whatever the case may be, knowing the ins and outs. So, and have that up close and personal look that no one else, that you, me, or mostly anybody else could have or say. So I think he knows exactly what he's talking about. Plus, in all his years of coaching, let's not forget of how long he was at St. John's, or maybe in St. Joe's, but how long he was a coach before he came over to the Wolverines coaching staff. So I think Coach Montemelli is a guy who knows exactly what the heck he's talking about. So as long as Eli Brooks remains the key factor in this, I think Michigan should have no problem taking care of Florida State. And frankly, if you were to ask me, Florida State may be a tougher test for them in the Sweet 16 than what any potential opponent could be, let's say UCLA, for example, in the Elite Eight, if they were to get that far.
Right. So that leads us to our Viget predicted score. Ed, what is your Viget predicted score? Brought to you by the Viget app.
Viget predicted score for me is, I'm going to say Michigan 77, Florida State 69.
Okay. 77-69, Michigan by 8. I'm going to go Michigan 78 and Florida State 69. I'm going to go Michigan by 9 on this one. So that's Michigan Wolverines men's basketball. The Viget predicted score brought to you by the Viget app. Referral code Stables for Stables Media with a capital S and the lowercase letter B in the middle to get 1,000 free Vig coins. Now, the Michigan State Spartans men's basketball team ended their season by blowing a 14-point lead and losing in overtime to the UCLA Bruins, aforementioned, in the first 4 round, 86-80. Now, right at the buzzer at halftime, there was miscommunication between like 2 Spartan players. And then Tom Izzo did not like it, which led to the Izzo argument with, I think, Marwin Hall.
Gabe Brown.
Gabe Brown. Thank you very much. Gabe Brown. Yes. Yeah. Gabe Brown shook Izzo off and Izzo went chasing right after him. And after that, the second half, UCLA made the comeback and the Bruins managed to win to advance to the first round of 64. Now, before we analyze the game, let's get to the Izzo Gabe Brown scuffle. Ed, what were your thoughts on that one?
My thoughts on that really is, I understand in this day and age, especially when things can go viral on a moment's notice and people are quick to throw in with their opinions and their reactions to how on the surface this could look bad. But really, when you get down to it, this is just something that coaches and players, I'm sure it goes through. They don't have this type of interaction at least once during a coach's tenure. That to me, that seems as amoral and not, frankly, something that's not normal or part of routine. Because I think when you have fiery personalities that share the same passion, they do have a tendency to clash at times, and that's just what we saw here in terms of Izzo and Brown. But I didn't think anything of a nefarious or bad nature of what Izzo was trying to do. He was trying to say, hey, listen, I'm the coach, you're the player. I'm just trying to give you some instruction on what you're doing, and you're just flat out ignoring me and walking away just because you're mad, you don't like my tone. So I don't necessarily blame Izzo for doing what he had to do. He's got to get his players' attention because, frankly, if the players are not listening to the coach, that's more of a negative on the coach than you could ever expect. So I understand that aspect. Plus, it's not like he went full Bob Knight and just walked up to the guy and choked him. Okay, he grabbed his jersey. Okay, he didn't slap him. He didn't do this. He didn't, leave a mark on his face or whatever. He didn't even hit him. He just grabbed his jersey. That's it. And
by the back of the jersey.
Right, back of the jersey. And Brown's natural reaction was to slap Izzo's hand away like that. I probably would have done the same thing. I say, hey, man, I'm not in the mood right now. Don't talk to me. Don't even grab me either. But at the end of the day, between Draymond Green and so many other former players, and probably some current players as well, describing not just with Izzo's style, how he coaches, how he interacts with his players, they want that. They prefer that type of interaction. It lets them know, that the coach cares, not just of what the team is doing, but what that player specifically is doing, and how they can elevate their game to a certain extent, as well as the fact that, again, it just goes without saying. I'm not going to repeat myself, but you know the gist of what I'm saying. So for that to have happened, I think if there was any reaction to it, it would have been it was just way overblown.
Yeah, I would say so. So good analysis on that scuffle. Not much to it, unlike Bobby Knight. Good point. Good comparison on that. So Tom Izzo, I think, should stay put for the Michigan State Spartans. I
Oh
don't think he
no,
got in
this
any
this
trouble.
this 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 one, please. He may have just gotten
Not necessarily.
right, nothing. It's little to nothing. He may have just got
Right.
a quick pep talk or a quick chat with the AD or the school president. Say, hey, listen, just be careful because we're in a day and age now where if you do something or say something and there's like a million of cameras waiting to snap it at a moment's notice, that could lead to some big trouble on a multitude of levels. But trust me, if anybody really thinks Izzo's going to get let go because of this, that you're crazy. You're absolutely
No,
insane.
no. Again, not much to it. So that's the Spartans. Their season's done. They can move on for
Yeah, I
that. But
mean, yeah, I mean, quick word note on the Spartans. At least they could say they got to a tournament, but I don't know with a showing like this where you only got in as one of the last four teams in, and you blow a double digit lead and you lose on literally your first day. I don't know if it really felt like you got into a tournament. It felt like it was a waste of a season. Now I'm sure this is one that Izzo and his staff will want to just throw in the garbage bin, light on fire, and just walk away. But there are some points I feel to learn from this season as regards to, yeah, if your star players aren't getting the help that they need, like we saw for most of the season from other key contributors, you're going to have some struggles. But it also does come down to the coaches making the right spots. And I think Izzo, even he will admit, despite his prideful and stubborn nature, he could have done better in certain spots and key elements and moments. And Frank, if he were here tonight, he would have a much better explanation with that, much further detail. But we all know exactly what we're talking about here. But there's still, despite the need to just you want to take this season and throw it away, never think about it again. There are some learning principles and learning lessons that can still be held from this as a result.
right. So yeah, Frank's busy with his own stuff with Bedford down there. Darren's busy with his stuff out on the West Coast. So yeah, that's why it's just you and me. But yeah, I think Frank has a lot to say about that. But yeah, I think we pretty much covered college basketball. So transitioning to pro basketball, according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, the Pistons traded DeLon Wright, their guard, to the Sacramento Kings for guard Corey Joseph, a 2021 second round draft pick via the Los Angeles Lakers, and a 2024 second rounder. The Pistons now have 3 second rounders in this year's upcoming NBA draft. And we're going to start our What's Your Grade segment brought to you by the Viget app. Ed, what is your grade on the DeLon Wright trade?
I'll give this one an A minus simply because of the fact it helps clear out the logjam that you had at the point guard spot uh, between Killian Hayes, and you had Derrick Rose earlier at the year, and of course many other players as well. Even now with Dennis Smith Jr. added into the fold, it was just a clouded up space that needed some spacing out. So with this move, you accomplished that. You also accomplished the fact that this could give you some potential financial help in the future as well, because with Corey Joseph that you're getting back, yes, he does have 1 year remaining left on his contract after this season. I think that's going to be worth about $14 million. But and this is a very key element that I saw this was pointed out in The Athletic. Let's say, for example, if they keep him on for the rest of the year, but they cut him or waive him by around a certain date, like I believe it was June 30th or so. That means if they were to do that they'll only be taking a cap hit of well below that margin, as opposed to keeping him on for a full year next season. So there's always that gives you potential a cap flex of what to do, or at least do something. And also helps create draft assets. Like you mentioned, Taylor, they now have 3 second round draft picks for this year, for this upcoming draft. And I know everybody will like to pay attention to the lottery and whatnot, but you can make some damn good steals in the second round of the draft. Okay. I believe that's where they got Sadiq Bey from last year, because remember, let's not forget, they didn't have that pick available until they traded Luke Kennard. So trading Luke Kennard essentially is what got them Sadiq Bey. And I think that young man has shown some promise this year. You would have loved to see more from Killian Hayes as well. But again, that's not his fault. He got injured. Things happen. But you like
Right.
what you see from when he was on the floor. And you'll have to see
Yeah.
that continue to progress furthermore. So again, when you clear up a logjam at point guard, which was already filled up to the brim as is, you create potential room for down the road if you want to make a move that will help you out with your cap space. And also you gain potential draft capital and assets, whether you want to move up in the draft, get another extra player for depth purposes, or to somehow flip that pick into another trade in and of itself in the offseason. That's entirely up to you. And Troy Weaver has been, I'm sure those were on at least three key points that were on his mind when he made this deal, because he's been a very, very busy man. And this is only his first year on the job.
That was a really good trade sending Luke Kennard to the Clippers. So that's Pistons, and we carry our What's Your Grade segment over to the Detroit Lions, who signed former Green Bay Packers wide receiver Brashad Perriman to a 1-year, $3 million deal. Ed, what is your grade on Perriman?
My grade on Perriman is just a C. Yeah, I think it's just done for depth purposes. Make sure that the cupboard isn't completely bare for Jared Goff to work with. I think they also brought in another player as well in Damian Ratley as well. Ratley,
yep, we're going to grade that one.
We'll grade him in a moment, but in terms of this one, I think it's just more so for depth purposes. He's not going to be competing for the starting receiver spot. He'll probably be around third or fourth string if he even gets to that far, because you know how cuts go in the preseason. But I just see it as done as a move for depth purposes, because they lost Kenny Galladay. He's going with the Giants. Marvin Jones, I believe he's going to Jacksonville. I don't even think they brought back Denny Amendola. So again, that's three names I already mentioned right there from your receiving core, three targets that you relied upon a lot. That's even when you had Stafford, and of course after you made the trade for Stafford for Goff. Those three guys at the very least are now gone. You got to replace them in some way, shape, or form. So at least for this move, I understand the reason why they did it. I'll give it a C. That's my grade.
All right. Okay, a C mid-range. So speaking of which, the Lions signed former Green Bay Packers backup quarterback Tim Boyle to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal as a backup quarterback. But for $2.5 million, I know we're not going to grade this, but it's worth at least
It's
some
minor.
kind of money.
It's a cheap deal. I think it's something that a guy like Sean Hill could have gotten back in the day when he was backing up Stafford. So it's really no biggie.
Right. So speaking of Damian Ratley, they signed him, former Giants and Browns wide receiver, to a free agent contract. Ed, what is your grade on Ratley? Let's get this over with.
Grade on Ratley is a C plus. I know he had a sub 4.4 40-yard dash at the combine 3 years ago, but it's worth noting that was 3 years ago. He's had a litany of injuries since then that has affected his play, prevented him from being on the field, so to speak. So while the numbers are not as flashy as he probably would have wanted to be, there is a reason behind that. Now, I don't know if that's going to carry over into his time here in Detroit. I don't know if maybe it was something that he did differently when he was on those other teams that he's probably going to switch up. But if there is one positive aspect to this, like I mentioned before with the other move, this is done for a wide receiver depth purpose, giving Jared Goff some type of help offensively. Because you know it's going to be a struggle this year, maybe even next year as well, because you don't have the type of talent rolling over from last year that you do this year. You just don't. But if he can at least stay healthy and gives you something with his speed that may still be there, I could see this being a potential low risk to moderate reward type of scenario. So I give it a C plus.
All right. And then they signed Cincinnati Bengals kicker Randy Bullock to replace Matt Prater, who went to the Arizona Cardinals as far as I can remember. Yeah. Randy Bullock, what's your grade on Randy Bullock?
C plus. You know, it's called you got to replace a kicker. I think Bullock would do fair. He may not be as potentially reliable as Prater or dependent upon at the way fans were for Prater, knowing that Prater was able to make the type of kicks that he made. We just don't know so much about Bullock. That's yet to be seen. So I don't know how this could potentially be a quote unquote steal move if things were to blossom the way they were. But for now, again, you're just replacing a guy at a needed position for depth purposes. So again, for that, I'll give it a C plus.
And then one more, former New Orleans Saints linebacker Alex Anzalone to a 1-year deal. Ed, what's your grade on Anzalone?
Even C, probably a potential C minus. I think this was just done for, again, depth purpose, but also at the linebacker spot because you saw a core of guys leave, excuse me, at that position as well in this offseason. You thought the wideouts had gotten gutted out. My goodness, what about the linebackers? For example, the guys that had left, excuse me, one moment. Yeah,
by the
between
way,
Reggie
yep.
Ragland, Jared Davis, Christian Jones, all those guys gone. You know, so you need to bring in some type of depth help here, and of course the fact that this is a guy that played with the Saints last year, someone I'm sure Dan Quinn would know very well. That familiarity that you tend to see coaches at a new spot bring over from their old spot. That's always a trend. So that doesn't surprise me. So because of that, I give my grade an even C.
All right. So just an even C, not a C minus. So we'll leave it at that, just a mid-range C. So speaking of Goff, the Lions converted, and by the way, that all those guys that you mentioned that were gone, that just frees up even more cap space. And speaking of freeing up cap space, the Lions have converted 20 million to quarterback Jared Goff's new contract, 25.65 million base salary into a signing bonus, opening up $15 million in cap space. So that right there is an overhaul, right? An overhaul of freeing up cap space right there.
It
And
does. Go ahead. I'm
mm-hmm.
sorry. Go ahead.
And then they signed, and then former Lions wide receiver Kenny Galladay agreed to a 4-year, $72 million contract with $40 million guaranteed with the New York Giants, like you called, Ed, earlier.
Yeah, I had a hunch he was going to go to the Giants. I don't think he was going to go to the Bears. I think the Giants, believe it or not, have more promise than the Bears, and that's saying something at this point. If I'm the Giants, I would not have given him that type of all that money. That's just my view. Good God, 40 mil guaranteed. But
wonder what 5 Points Fitz thinks of that one.
Hope he's I think hopefully he'll take this news better than he did the Daniel Jones draft night, because Galladay does have talent. And it's the potential is there, but it's just that if there is a knock or a question on him, it would be his health. He only played 9 games last year, so you're going to give a guy like that 40 mil. You better hope he turns into something. And as regards to Goff with his contract, not only they're restructuring, I think this could be, to me, a move that tells me that this may be a long-term type of deal that they're thinking of with Jared Goff, and it wouldn't surprise me. Again, Brad Holmes was the guy who drafted him, or at least looked into his being drafted when he was at the Rams. He made this move to get Goff here in exchange for Stafford. So, and as I think you were going to point out eventually, Goff had fallen out of favor with Sean McVay. So I think it was almost a given that Goff was going somewhere. We just didn't know for certain if it was going to be Detroit. But I think now that he's here, fresh start, new lease, he's with a guy that he knows in the past wanted him then and still wants him now. It could give him a boost in confidence, and also could be a telling sign to me that they may be thinking of going in on Goff long term.
Yeah, at least a sigh of relief too. So not too much pressure to put some pressure off Jared Goff in terms of the contract money and the self-esteem and stuff. Yeah. So the Lions did that. I thought it was the right move. So that's Lions. The Red Wings. Yeah, they got smoked 7-1 by the Nashville Predators. Yeah, they stink. Predators swept that doubleheader in Bridgestone Arena. I wanted to get to an article from the hockey writers on the 7 prospects that busted, like at least a few years ago. Brendan Smith, Timu Polkin, and Thomas McCollum included. I was kind of shocked at the Timu Polkinen guy being a bust. Timu Polkinen went to the Wild. He struggled there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But Brendan Smith, that was a definite bust. Yeah. Smith was a lousy defenseman for the Red Wings. And then he played for the Rangers, same Brendan Smith character.
Exactly. And if you notice with all these other defensemen that they have drafted as well, they weren't necessarily able to find or quite able to find that replacement, that heir to the throne, essentially, that was going to take over once Nick Lidstrom retired. And once he did leave, you saw, oh my goodness, how much of a gaping hole that the Red Wings had at defenseman. I think that also when you mentioned the fact that all these busts or these players earned that bust label within the past 5-7 years, that to me speaks to how out of touch Ken Holland definitely grew by the end of his tenure, and how much of his drafting skill or ability was fully exposed once he didn't have a Con Anderson holding his hand anymore. If there is, I will say though, unfortunately, as much as I don't want to say it, you could potentially be adding another name to that list soon if things don't turn up the way he wanted to be, and that would be, to me, Evgeny Svechnikov. So
Svechnikov. Oh yeah. And another name, Dennis Cholowski. Remember the Pavel Datsyuk trade?
Yeah.
Jeff Moss is still touching on that on his Twitter handle at HowAboutIt91. And he's going to be our special guest next week, Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Stables Media. I cannot wait for that.
Looking forward to that one, definitely.
Yeah. Moss is going to talk tons, including that. Tons of stuff. Yeah. So that's Red Wings. Finally, the Tigers. Veteran former All-Star pitcher Julio Teheran makes the 40-man roster, and Matt Boyd will start on opening day, Thursday, April 1st at 1:10 at Comerica Park against the Cleveland Indians. Of course, a lot of Tiger fans suck up to Matt Boyd so much. Matt Boyd has absolutely struggled as a starting pitcher. He can't even last 5 innings.
And the fact
fans still love him anyway.
And the fact that
what is wrong with him?
And the fact that he's going to be the guy that's your opening day starter. I mean, what does that speak to your rotation?
Nothing. Oh my God.
I mean, I get it. They don't want to put Mize up there or Manning up there that early too soon, but oof, you better hope they develop quickly.
Yeah. Well, Mize, despite giving up 2 earned runs and 5 hits over 4 innings pitched in a 3-3 tie the Toronto Blue Jays, he didn't walk anybody. In fact, he struck out 9 batters, 9 Blue Jay hitters.
Well, that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see from a guy who's looking to be your next ace, your next workhorse down the road in the next few years or so. So that's good to know. Very good to know.
Mize's other start earlier, AJ Hinch criticized Casey Mize, and even Mize would have to have agreed right there.
And also, speaking of Hinch, he did mention that Tariq Skubal earned a roster spot as well.
Yep, that's true. That is absolutely true. So that's Tigers. So that is everything we've covered in our episode. Before we go, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports mobile app, Big It. Enter the referral code STABLES, capital S, lowercase letter B in the middle, for Stables Media when you sign up. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the VIG app and sign up with the referral code STABLES for 1,000 free VIG coins to set you up for a VIG account. Ed, excellent job as always. Well, welcome back, Frank Vajner, next week. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. We'll be back next week when Frank Vajner makes his return, and we have special guest Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag, like I've mentioned before. Meantime, for Ed Smith, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DT2Phillips with 2 L's, and follow Ed Smith on Twitter and Instagram at EdSmith313. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, Tata for now. Power to the people. Hit them with the high. And we rest our case. Stay safe.
Go Blue. On to the Final Four.
Yes, sir. Hopefully so.